Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of the Etiquette Guy. I'm Jay Remer, your host, and with me today is Mary Rogers.
Hello, Jay.
Hi, Mary. Thanks for coming back on the show.
Again, my pleasure. Always a pleasure.
What would I do without you? Anyway, today we're going to talk about something different. We're going to talk about museums, art galleries, and auction houses, and the different etiquette involved with each, because we've gotten a number of questions that have come in about it, and people love talking about this, and I hear that it's a favorite topic of yours, so I'm going to let you fire at will. Oh,
great. Okay, well, we have lots of questions pertaining to those. I was just on a personal note, I was to a gallery reception just on the weekend and really thoroughly enjoyed myself. One little pet peeve that I have, and what do you think about this? A lot of our art galleries will have opening receptions, and the wine is flowing, and some of them go all out and have a beautiful reception table with a wide assortment of food. And of course that encourages a lot of people to come to the receptions, but then people will just hang out at the food table. And it's, you're filled with, you're in these rooms filled with beautiful art, and then you're looking over at a table and you're just seeing people shoveling food in. What can a gallerist do to prevent that, do you think?
Well, you mean the gallery owner?
Yes.
I think the gallery owner is kind of at the mercy of the caterer, and because normally these things are catered. And caterers have different techniques for how to manage this sort of thing, but I think that people should not hog the food table just the way they shouldn't hog the bar. I mean, you don't stand at the bar where people are trying to place drink orders and carry on and have a conversation. I don't care for how long it is, it's rude. And the same thing is true of the food table, and oftentimes I find colleagues will take care of that and say, stop hogging the food table. But from a traditional etiquette point of view, you can either hold a drink or you can hold a plate with food. You can rarely hold both at the same time. So if you're going to have both, you have to have a place to park one or the other. Drinks should always be held in the left hand, this hand, because you need the right hand for shaking, and you don't want it to be cold, and you don't want it to be wet, and you don't want it to be, well, occupied, because you've got to, you can't shake hands with your left hand. I mean, one doesn't. So, and you don't want to be caught with food plate in one hand, drink in the other, and unable to shake hands at all. I mean, you have to be practical about these things, and after all, these art openings are not there for the benefit. It's not a soup kitchen. It's not there for people to have dinner. And so you should be respectful that hors d'oeuvres are not, it's not your hors d'oeuvre table. It's to be shared with other people. So what I find sometimes the clever wait staff will do is they'll sort of elbow in if somebody's and they'll pretend to sort of be rearranging, or they will be rearranging. They'll be refilling the platter and make it so that you can, so that you'll have to move out of the way. Excuse me, I need to replenish this. And sometimes the nickel will drop. Some people are just going to be hogs, and that's just the end of it, and that's the way it goes. So there's not really a whole lot that you can do. But I think in general, people are fairly respectful about that, and those who aren't, usually their colleagues will. You can't, as the art gallery owner, i.e. host, say anything about it, because that would be rude, and you don't want to embarrass your guests.
That's right,
you don't want to embarrass anyone, really. But usually a quiet little, are you going to eat all the oysters tonight, Mary?
Yes, I say yes.
We'll sometimes do it.
Really how
And if somebody asks me that question, I say, well, actually, yes, I am.
Move out of my way. I just wanted to ask that question because I just happened to notice that myself there on the weekend. But I suppose we should probably start out, and why don't we just talk about the differences between an art gallery, an auction house, and then a museum. For our viewers.
Yeah, sure. So I think probably the most staid of those three types of institutions would be the museum. because when you go into museums, you're not allowed to touch anything. You're not really allowed to get very close to anything for security reasons and for conservation reasons. I mean, there are a lot of good reasons why you can't just keep touching that same old piece of wood. Imagine if 1 million people touch that same piece of wood every year, or even over the course of 10 or 20 years, 1 million of those is going to have an effect after time. So you can't do that. Also, the oils on your hands and so forth. So even at museums, you'll find the curators or the curatorial staff will be wearing white gloves, and that's to keep their perspiration away from the objects that they might be. I know even here, well, I don't mean even here, but at the Ross Museum, where they handle objects on a fairly infrequent basis, just once or twice a year, maybe 3 or 4 times at the most, they always wear gloves. It's the proper way to do things. So that's why they have things corded off at museums so you can't touch, you can't get too close. The whole photographic thing has changed over the years now because they realize that it's so easy to take photographs that they really allow it in most museums. Even I went to a museum not too long ago, and I asked specifically to see a particular item, and I said I need to photograph it, and they said, well, you can go and see it, but you can't photograph it. Well, I photographed it all I wanted. I mean, there was no flash going off, there was nobody else in the gallery, and if I'd gotten caught, I would have had my knuckles wrapped, but you know, if I want a picture of something, it can be done. So I'm not encouraging people to break rules, but what I'm saying is that there are reasons why. Now, in the old days, flashes would they would have an effect, say, on a watercolor, in that it would over time it would fade the actual color more so than the light from the bulbs, and it also is distracting to people around you. So museums are quiet places. You don't go in there and have it's not a coffee klatch. It's not a place to discuss the gossip in the neighborhood. It's a contemplative place where you are focused on the various works of art, and you go in, you might spend a day, you might spend 10 minutes. I mean, it just depends what your mood is and what you're there to do. I can remember when I was much younger, I used to walk into museums, and the first thing I would do is to yawn, because I found it so sleepy. And now things have changed. Museums have changed dramatically in the last 50 years, but they're a lot more interactive. The exhibitions are beautifully displayed, and they bring in great works of art from all over the world. It's a big deal. So museums are places to go and enjoy works of art, enjoy exhibits the way they've been assembled. It can be very educational, and it's very beautiful. And you can come in and you can go out and nobody says boo. It's not like you have to spend a certain amount of time there. You cannot take food into museums, and that's clearly marked because they don't want food flying all over the place. And the guard, you see, will be there are guards in museums. They look like they're policemen, and they're there to keep people from damaging the works of art. It's that simple. And also, they can be very helpful in answering questions. And I know that the guards today, both men and women, are quite knowledgeable about the room that they're guarding or the exhibit that they're attending to, because they've made it a point to be able to be helpful to the guests. It makes the whole atmosphere in the museum. I know at the Beaverbrook Art Gallery, I'm impressed by the knowledge that all of the staff have. It makes it a much friendlier gallery. Now, that's a world-class art gallery by any standards, and it is one of the most welcoming galleries. It isn't perfect, but it is, as far as the displaying of art, it's a beautiful, beautiful space. And the staff couldn't be more friendly or approachable. So that's an example of an art museum. The next least, or probably the most comfortable place to go, next most comfortable place to go would be an art dealer, a private art gallery. So you might go into some place, say for example, Tim Isaac would be an example, or Peter Buckland has a lovely art gallery in St. John, and there are art galleries in Fredericton, and there are art galleries all over the world. But when you go into a place like that, generally what they have on display is the work of one or two different artists or a school of artists. Sometimes they'll have a smattering, but you know, in antique shops, it's a whole hodgepodge of things. You want to be sure that you don't knock stuff over. And so even though the idea is that in an art gallery, they want to sell you stuff, they still don't want you mauling it. They don't want you damaging it. So you do want to be respectful. And if it says, please do not, please ask for assistance for handling this object, do so. Don't just feel that because you know what you're doing, you can do that. It sets a poor example for other customers, and it pisses the art gallery owner off. So, because they don't necessarily know that you're okay to do that. Or they may say, well, if you want to handle that piece of silver, we'd like you to wear this pair of white gloves. These things happen. If you spot a painting that you want to buy, and you want to check on authenticity, you might ask if you could have it black lighted, which simply means that you go into a dark room with a fluorescent light and they shine it over the whole painting so any conservation will show up quite brightly. So these are kinds of things, if you're going to spend a lot of money, and I consider spending a lot of money being anything over $500, unless you really know what you're doing. You should, don't spend more than $500 without seeking the advice of an expert. It's sort of a rule of thumb that I've always used. So, but art galleries are very interested in selling you things. So allow them to explain what it is that you're looking at and where it came from and so forth, and quiz them on the provenance and all that sort of thing if it matters to you. But, and if you're going to buy a practical thing like a chair or a table, sit in the chair, you know, be able to sit in the chair. And, you know, so these kinds of things are done where you would never do such a thing in a museum. Now, the most comfortable I find, because, well, of course I find them all comfortable, but I think that auction houses that's a whole show.
Yes,
I mean,
tell me about these auction houses.
Auction houses, I mean, Tim has an auction house Tim Isaac has an auction house in St. John. Mr. Bond has an auction house up near there. There are a number of different auction houses around. But I worked at Sotheby's in New York when I first entered the workforce, and that's, of course, the largest auction house in the world, and it was fabulous. But it took me a while before I became auctioneer and got to handle the snazzy $1 million things, but it was a place to learn the business. And not only do you learn the business as an employee there, where you unpack crates and do inventories and identify things and clump them together in groups of saleable lots and so forth, but as a student, say, of American furniture or of Chinese export porcelain or whatever interest you might have, you can go to these sales that are devoted specifically to your area of interest, and you can gain really a great wealth of knowledge, because at auction houses they encourage you to handle the materials. Now, if you're dealing with rare documents or things that are likely to break, they don't particularly want you picking up dishes and, you know, ancient Chinese tomb figures, but you can. And if you're a serious buyer, you definitely should be allowed to. And but I think if you're going to spend a certain amount of money on something, you're not likely to just be there with the masses. You can make private appointments to view different things. And oftentimes, people who want to view expensive items are celebrities themselves, and they just don't go out in public because it's not fun. So, you know, there are ways around these things, but generally auction houses are supposed to be fun, and they want to encourage you to make the connection with the objects so that you'll spend more money. Because, you know, auction fever is a big thing, and so it's very important, if you're going to go to an auction with the idea to buy, you want to make sure that you set up whatever credit arrangements need to be made ahead of time, whether it's to have your checks approved or whether it's to register for a bidding number, which everyone in the auctions today, everybody registers for, it looks like a large lollipop, and it has a number that's clearly visible to the auctioneer. And that's how you bid, so they know exactly who you are, and it's all carefully recorded. So you want to get all that set up ahead of time. And so I think that viewing the objects at an auction is very important also, because you buy as is. You don't buy with any guarantees. You buy the item as is. So if there's a crack, you're buying it with the crack. And no fair crying over spilt milk, like, well, I didn't notice the crack. Too bad, it was there. And the auction house has all of this condition reports carefully noted, so that if you, say, were to call up, say there was a piece of Chinese export porcelain that you were particularly interested in, you could call up and say, could you give me a condition report on this particular item? And they would say, well, this is what the condition is. There's a hairline crack here, there, or the other place. Or no, it's in absolutely perfect condition. So, and oftentimes when you read auction catalogs, they're written using a certain language, and that language has certain connotations. For instance, the word fine in an auction catalog means perfect condition. Rare means that it's really rare. And fine and rare, that was the category I always liked, will lead you to the juicy bits. The good part. So say you collect dolls.
Yes, okay.
And there's a big doll auction. And you read through the catalog, which you can generally get to online, or you can have it mailed to you for a fee. It'll have quite a lengthy description about these different dolls, and it can become, a lot of these art auction catalogs become reference books for people. And I know that I had thousands of them that were disposed of, sadly, at one point in my life. But at any rate, they hold a tremendous amount of information. And so so auction houses, they want you to be relaxed. They don't want you breaking stuff. They don't want you rearranging things. Like if there's a set of 8 dishes, it's no fair hiding one so that it's all of a sudden only, well, I don't know where the 8th one is, thinking that people are going to not bid because of it. Those kinds of games are not encouraged. But going and having a good time, and you can talk out loud. You can compare notes with the dealers and all that kind of stuff. And
do you think it's good form to eat? Because often these auction houses, you could be there all day. And what about, and you don't want to miss anything.
Yeah, well, I think at the sales, obviously, at an evening sale at Sotheby's or Christie's, you don't eat. But if you're at an all-day country auction, you eat. You bring your sandwiches with you. They often have catering right on the spot. So a lot of these, a lot of auctions are not held indoors. There are a lot of auctions held out in the country and all over the world. And so those are very sort of down-home, local, and eating is encouraged, especially outdoors. Indoors, I think you want to be respectful of other people, so you don't walk in with a smelly old piece of pizza, or you don't walk around with drinks that can spill all over oriental carpets that are maybe going to be for sale, or that sort of thing. So I think you use your head there, but obviously if food is for sale at the site, they're not going to tell you can't eat it. If they didn't want you eating food, they wouldn't have it for sale.
Okay. So that can be your guideline
right
there, really.
Yeah.
Now, what about attire to wear at a museum or an art gallery? What should you avoid wearing?
Well, I think generally, if you're going to a museum, you can wear pretty much whatever you want. I think that you should be respectful of other people. So gentlemen should take their hats off when they go into a museum, just like they should going into any building. As you know, I've said that almost every show. Sure. So I don't think that, for instance, if you're going into an art gallery, I don't think loose sleeves is a good idea for women.
Loose sleeves, okay.
Because they can kind of dangle.
Okay.
And they can run into things. I think that you should have comfortable shoes, but they shouldn't be boots that are going to bring in the mud from out of doors.
Okay.
So I think generally if you're going to go into a museum, you would dress the way you would if you were going to somebody's house. I mean, you would wear, I mean, there's nothing to keep you from wearing blue jeans into a museum, but you got to wear shoes. You got to wear shirts. It's kind of like going into these restaurants to say no shirts, no service,
yeah.
or whatever it is. That would be the same. So there is a dress code, a rough dress code for museums. Auction houses would be sort of the same, although you see people wandering into auction houses that really you wonder if they're just coming in out of the cold, because they are so, well, it's not even informal. They dress like bag ladies almost. But what I came to realize when I worked in New York is that you cannot judge a book by its cover. And people who may be dressed really informally could be the ones buying the $10 million Picassos, and it happens. So, and there are just as many that'll buy the $100 plates. So it isn't really, it isn't so, I think you just have to dress sensibly. So if you're going to be at an indoor auction venue for the day, you may want to wear, you may want to wear layers of clothes just because you may get hot or you may get cold, and that just happens with everybody. And outdoors, you want to be sure that you dress warmly and that you have waterproof boots or shoes, because even if the ground is dry, the ground is a lot colder than your body is, even in the summer. And you want to make sure that your feet don't actually get cold. And, so there are things like that to pay attention to. I mean, if it's going to be outdoors and there's a, it's going to be raining, wear a rain hat and bring an umbrella, because otherwise you're just going to get wet and have a terrible time. And I think, for art galleries, if you're going to an opening, dress up. Put on something that looks a little arty. And if you're, if there's, if you know the artist and, they like, great big purple orchids, stick one on your left lapel and be fun. I think that there's a lot of, there's fun. You can have fun. Openings are fun times, and and it's a chance for everyone to express themselves. And for those of us who enjoy sort of dressing up just because we enjoy dressing up, I think that it's a great opportunity to do that. It should be an opportunity not to miss. But auctions, oftentimes people want to be incognito. They don't want to be seen being bidding. Because they think that they're
conspicuous. Is very important.
So so you don't wear the loud colors there. Now it doesn't matter to me because I know what I'm doing in an auction house. So I know how much I'm willing to spend, and if somebody wants to bid me up to that point, great. And if they bid one over, they wind up with it, and that's fine too. So I don't mind. I don't like going and being conspicuous. If I'm planning to buy something expensive, I tend to do it as quietly as possible. But sometimes, that's not. It's easier said than done.
Sometimes people will have buyers for them. They employ people to bid for them.
Yes, well, they will do that
at higher end auction houses.
Yeah, they'll do that at auction houses, and they'll do it at art galleries too, because they want somebody else's opinion. I did that for years. I bought any number of collections of things for people, different people, because they wanted my okay. They wanted me to say, yes, this is a great addition to your collection, and this is how it fits in. So there's a certain, if you have that working knowledge, people hire you, and that's so that it is something. Now it's unusual for an auction house to provide that kind of service. All the experts in charge of the sale tend to be very knowledgeable in the field, especially at the better auction houses. So. At any rate, we could go on for days, but that brings us to the end of this show. All of a sudden.
Okay, that went by really quickly.
Yeah, but we can, if you all have any questions about auction houses, museums, or art galleries, feel free to let us know, because there's a lot of material that goes on. Thank you, Mary, for helping out on another episode of the Etiquette Guy.
Thanks.
And thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll watch us again soon. Bye for now.